Welcome, game dev adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today we're joined by Ami Cai, and we're talking about the intersections of game design and VTubing.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
Welcome all to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. In our live magical podcast, we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. As always, I'm your host, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster here at the Indie Game Academy. And joining me today is Ami Cai. And we don't have the video here up for those who are listening to the podcast, but for those who are here live, you may see a non-human in the chat right now because this is an episode about VTubing. I am excited to have you here. Ami is a visual narrator, also currently a project manager, and they're here to talk about VTubing and game design. Welcome to the show, Ami. What are you having for lunch here today?
I'm having for lunch today is essentially a local takeout of they call it the La Salsa salad, and it has a bunch of like chicken and like tomatoes and a lot of great veggies.
Ooh, that sounds healthy.
Yeah, I'm really obsessed because I kind of live in the outskirts of like a New Jersey area, so
Okay.
being able to like still buy a local kind of like deli-esque style like lunch is still really valuable for me.
That's fantastic. I love a good like hearty salad with some fixins in it that keep it healthy, but also like feel like you have a nice full meal. You get your lunch out of it. I've definitely been eating way too unhealthy lately, though, so I am impressed by your lunch choices today.
Thanks.
Absolutely. So welcome to the show, Ami. As always, the first question that we like to ask here is for the origin story. So if you would, I would love to hear where you are in the game industry right now and then how you got there.
Yeah, so part of what I do currently in the games industry, I currently am a project manager at a New York State local government agency, which, by the way, I don't represent today. This is all like opinions and thoughts and topics of my own and not of the company. But I also have been doing a lot of freelance illustration, graphic design, a lot of kind of art lead level of work in the industry for a few years now. And I've kind of gone through a little bit of a wonky, kind of virtual heavy journey. I was first introduced to game design through Code Coven and other online educational spaces for games. I know IGA does a ton of something of equivalent, and I'm so happy that there's been such a boom of like accessible education for game design since I started from one of those. So I'm always a big fan of collectives like this. And from there, I did essentially some personal projects. And then I think I was also in the realm when the the boom, I guess, because I started in 2020 of like game design, like educational courses and like workshops, but also that was the time when there's just a lot of funding going into kind of sporadic opportunities. Like, for example, being paid to join a game jam was, not unheard of that time. Now is kind of like impossible to find. But like I was finding myself in a lot of like small gig kind of situations that would support me doing a bunch of games with newer teams. And I've been like, from that point on, I was mostly virtual. Like my work was virtual. My online community to learn game development was all virtual. And then I eventually went into my grad school program, which was a grad school program with NYU. And yeah, and then from there, I directly went into the position that I am in right now, because I'm very big fan of production and pipelines and having to make sure that all of everyone's games gets to their end. You know what I mean?
Amazing. It's so wonderful to have you on the show then. Yeah, it is we were definitely there during the boom in virtual education. In 2020, part of the reason that this even started was because of the pandemic, for better or for worse. And the Indie Game Academy was just a sort of convenient way for me to extend Unity classes that I was teaching for another organization. So it's wonderful that that's how you got your start, and that you got to learn so much about games and enter this space through something like that. Now, for anybody who is in the live session in our Discord, you are looking at a non-human on Ami's video right now. So can you tell us a little bit about your VTuber avatar, how you created it, and yeah, maybe a little bit of its background?
Yeah, so of the same nature, the VTuber that I'm currently, I guess, quote unquote, wearing is a live 2D VTuber, and I don't normally stream on it. It's a very buggy model, but for the sake of today's topic, I felt like it was
Hmm.
appropriate to kind of like adone this aware of this model. And so this is like my demon Sona. This is a VTuber that I've always kind of it's like yourself but slightly fantasy, right? Like a lot of people do different personas of themselves, or they do like whole different characters where they kind of LARP out for their streams. And yeah, and for me, because I used to do a lot, I guess I still do a lot of like art streams, co-working, game dev, co-working, and game like indie gameplay. I
Hmm.
kind of still lean towards my own personality and more so my own identity than a quote unquote like LARPing persona.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so since I've been doing like VTubing as a quote unquote hobby and not full time, I've been very, very aware of the space that has been kind of conglomerate on Twitch, and then also like slowly budding into different niches and different corners that you get to see either like on Twitch directly, or just kind of the offshoot content onto like Twitter, onto YouTube, and kind of where they cultivate from there.
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting. Yeah,
mhm.
I am curious. I'm most curious about. So this is the indie game lunch hour. It is primarily for those who are working on games in their own, dream of starting a studio one day, or are actively pursuing or running a studio. So one of the reasons I was kind of excited to talk about this is because we're always, as indies, looking for that differentiating factor. How do we stand out from the thousands of games that are released every month? Can you tell us a little bit about how VTubers and indie devs are using VTubing these days?
Yes. Okay. So I was so excited to talk about this when I was approached, like what topics I am personally like able to kind of yap about for a very long time.
Hmm.
So the very fun thing about VTubing is that it has kind of overwhelmingly gone through different categories of where that overlap is. So if we think of a traditional Venn diagram, think if there's like 3 or 4 Venn diagrams, and then I can kind of break down those different overlaps because there's just so plentiful of great things happening right now in this space. And
Hmm.
to kind of give, since this is a 101, just kind of some quick bullet points. VTubers, by their definition, are called virtual YouTubers.
Hmm.
But I am going to be more leaning towards the streaming space, the live
Hmm.
streaming aspect of VTubers. And then, so code wise, we can talk about where those VTubers can be made from, but also what I'll be leaning towards will be also chat integrations. And I'll also be talking about live stream gameplay and game design with live audiences and what that looks like. Because, something that overlaps with, a regular streamer is that they are also able to interact with their like with their chat and their audience. But using that basic, aspect, and then using the virtual YouTuber basic aspect of a virtual character, that's where the kind of realm I'll be kind of leaning towards. So things that are integrated in general live streaming audience is stuff like widgets, chatbots, redeemables, plugins. There's a bunch of these interaction implementation. And I have a quick link, which is not great for a podcast
Ooh.
audio, but very quickly, if I can grab
We'll
it
put
and
it in the
post it there.
description. Yes.
Yes.
For anyone who
Um,
is listening after the fact, it'll be in the description.
okay, great. But yes, there's Twitch has like essentially this cultivation of different API integration. Like there's a lot of code available that's already kind of well established, like how Unity has a bunch of the online
Hmm.
space accessible knowledge. So putting this all into the side of like, okay, we're talking about VTubers, but we're also talking about specifically live streaming VTubers, and then so we're talking about live streaming elements. So there's I'm gonna try and go through this like spectrum. So one end of the spectrum is We Are OFK, the game title of a indie game series, or I guess it's not a series, but an indie game where they talk about being band members. And that title, they actually did a very, very fun Twitch stream where their characters, because they're modeled in low poly, like 3D models, they actually, for their release live stream, like like wore
Like,
their
were the
VTuber models.
characters?
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
they were able to essentially role play interacting with an audience, and like
Huh.
that was really fun. I was a participant of that like live stream, more so like just like in the chat, less so of like of the cast, but like the cast were able to really give that audience almost like a game parasocial level. And you know, I think it's very charming. I think it's also very endearing to be in that space when you can interact with your game characters that you're like fawning over, the characters that you're really like falling in love with. And so when you're able to interact with them in that space, it seems really fun. So that's one aspect. One side of the spectrum is that your content, if they already have voice actors, if they already have models that are like 2D or 3D, like my model is 2D, but even if your models are 2D and they're just like basically rigged, then you have this opportunity where you can actually let your characters like reach different avenues of interaction with their audience that is way more accessible than you think. like it is very easy to kind of rig up a model, but if you already have a voice actor and a quote unquote voice claim, then like you can really just set up a fun stream, one-off stream that can be like Q&A, and then you role play as the characters and have that audience interaction that has really great long lasting like memories, I guess.
Yeah,
So
what a
really recommend that.
fascinating. This is already really cool. I guess I like could have imagined something like this, but it's really wonderful to hear it being used actively somewhere. And I think, as I said, like the big problem of indie, we can make amazing games. We can make games that compete with some of the biggest companies, but we can't get noticed without spending millions of dollars in marketing. So this is a wonderful or exciting opportunity for indie devs to consider putting together. I'm curious. Before I know you're going to tell us about the other end of the spectrum, which I'm looking forward to. But before then, what is it? What kind of effort does it take to put one of these avatars together for those who might be considering this?
Yeah. Again, I really think if I'm a big contender of reusing assets, which is why I think this spectrum is so like this side of the spectrum is so important. They call themselves, by the way, like gorillas in games, like the gorillas in games. Like you can interact with the characters. So exciting. Anyway, so what you can do. So my setup is like an OBS. This is OBS is just so you can kind of customize your layout as much as you like, but you can go even more basic in some spaces. But OBS, and then you can, if you have just like a 2D image, there's a bunch of PNG tuber programs, and then for a more like rigged 2D object or even 3D models, you go to VTube Studio. VTube Studio is kind of like the standardized like VTuber streaming program, but it's also very, very like low ramp of learning. Like the learning slope is very small. Like it's not that hard to pick up, and the assets you should just be reusing. So like if the background, the character, like these are all things that you could just like plop from your game into OBS, and then just have a Twitch channel. So yeah, standard things to have. OBS, have a like model like program, either PNG tuber like program or like a rigged, highly more detailed one like VTube Studio, and and then a Twitch. So that's kind of all you really need.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's super fun. I say as a hobbyist, like VTuber, I
Yeah.
recommend everyone to do it. It's so fun.
It feels like so we have the Foundry teams happening right now, which is where this is us trying to escalate in what we do. So it's us taking 3 of our student teams and actually helping them launch studios and bring those games to Kickstarter. And at least one of the games feels like it could immediately do this. Maybe 2 of them. Um, and it feels like a really fun time. I'd love to like sit down and hear, the background, do a little play acting, role play with the characters from these games, hear their backstory, learn about them. Yeah, the
Yeah.
box, the boxes alive
Yeah.
might be harder for that, but
It really is like, it's funny because in other media's like animation, there's a lot of
hmm
times where like they're doing like auction streams or even just like Q&A streams where the voice actors
hmm
come in and then just
yeah,
answer questions that like it's like other medias out there are already doing this. It's just in games we have the assets to really just, you know, plug it into like a live stream program and then like work within it.
it's actually so one of the games people are making jokes in the chat right now.
Yeah.
One of the games is called The Box is Alive, which is sort of an awkward walker. So it's literally a cardboard box like rolling around the world.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, but people are making jokes like you could still have that be an avatar. It's just a
Yeah.
box,
Listen,
like
I'll go into
wiggling.
some really fun 3D model like examples in a minute,
Yeah,
but like you could definitely do a box and you
yeah.
could definitely get really crazy with a box on a stream
I
like
love
this.
that. I think one of the things that I think indies don't forget this, but let me just say it very clearly. Like we as game developers, what we're actually doing is creating delight for our players. And there's different flavors of that. Our Dark Souls out there is a very particular kind of delight. But ultimately, we're just trying to create memorable, interesting moments. And something
Mhm.
like this, where a player gets to meet the characters that they've started to fall in love with or care about, is delightful. It reminds me of like some of the things Disney Imagineers do in their parks to make the lines more
Mhm.
interesting and exciting. It's just an extra way to expand your universe and get your players invested and interested.
Also fun history lore drop is that Disney exhibitions was one of the first like highly detailed VTubers
Oh,
because they would do
interesting.
that with I think there's a really famous clip that's of the turtles from Finding
hmm
Nemo. They have
Mm.
model like actors in the back like doing face rigs and reacting to like kids interacting in the space and it's like yeah like it's used out there, in
So
exhibition kind of
cool.
like experiential design, right?
hmm
Okay. And then so some other things I want to talk about is so
Yes.
going in the middle here, there's a lot of VTubers that are learning to mod games and using their modded games to then have their characters interact in that space. One that I will highlight is Alpine Showtime. I don't actually know if I'm saying their name right, but it's Alpine. And they made a Doom overlay where it was
Hmm.
a fake, it's quote unquote fake mod where they were able to like change the UI to essentially be of their stream. Really great stuff. I honestly think it's really cool to see like because now you have content creators almost living in the games that you're making and that's kind of like a whole other realm of oh wait like we can have folks live in your games now in a way that is very
Hmm.
uniquely of VTubers and less so of like someone just playing them, right? So
Hmm.
really recommend seeing some of the because I'm mostly highlighting like indie VTubers. I'm actually like a fake VTuber fan. I don't really know any of the corporate like VTuber like news. I just keep
I'm fine
track
with
of all
that.
the indies.
Just stay in indie. Yeah, we don't
Yeah,
gotta
yeah,
talk about
yeah.
anything else.
Exactly. But yeah, Alpine is a very great example of
Wow.
really mixing up what VTubers can be pushed to in a boundary,
Yeah.
using clay models, using like these fake modding like spaces, and yeah, really, really amazing things to see.
So cool.
Another one who actually did mod a game is Vania. And they modded Mario games to essentially have their character in and to have their like special, visual effects and other call outs. So that's also something really fun is that VTubers are getting their hands in the code of games, right? So
Hmm.
there's a level of like, if you're looking for content creators, maybe there's a way to, you know, reach out to VTubers and also let them know if there's a way for them to get, you know, in your code a little bit, you know?
Yeah, the modding world is really fascinating. I've seen a lot of really cool stuff on Twitch and with audience interaction. Like some of the earlier stuff I saw was just people adding really like basically interesting pledge managers. So if you donate a
Yes.
certain amount, you can like drop a creeper on your favorite Minecraft player. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of thing is fascinating and super fun. So I'm loving the idea, like going even deeper, actually changing the version of the game. Like the game is a different customized version of the game that only this VTuber is playing that somehow allows audience interaction and engagement. It really it feels like the future of gaming is a somewhat amalgamous like kind of mess. We're all entering each other's IPs and using each other's content and editing each other's games. It's going to be really interesting to see where this goes. Like, what is the natural continuity of this kind of tech?
Mm-hmm. It really is fascinating to me because back in the day, modding was just such a like unheard of thing, but because it's become more accessible into learning of how like these games are made in code, it's just I find it very admirable to see VTubers putting their like because they're not being paid to like do these modded games. Like this is just truly out of fun of how can they make their viewers feel more like quote unquote immersed of
Hmm.
watching this character or this persona interact in the space. So
Hmm.
it's really exciting because someone's just that passionate of being engaged with your game. Like that is
Hmm.
so to me it's really enthralling and really endearing to see it all.
Hmm.
And then so shifting a little bit away from like existing games, I'll show like three different I'll drop three different names, but essentially what I will also then go into is when streamers are making games. Like the streamers where their whole stream setup, whether it's widgets, whether it's redeemables, whether it's plugins, their whole stream setup is essentially the chat interacting with their
Hmm.
like setup. And that is very like chaotic at times, but if with the right level of like iteration and the right amount of playtesting, you can really get it more fluid. A really great example of this is Shindigs. Shindigs on Twitch does a lot of like I almost want to say like scrappy, but like Shindigs does a lot of scrappy like almost like mini games and like sections and areas of their stream where they have the chat really be engaged with controlling their characters on their stream. So they'll use the like Peepo Frog as like being the chat's character, and then the chat can like put in like letter commands, type a word, or like put in different controls to then control that character. Like, is that
Hmm.
not just the same as putting different input keys, right? The input
Hmm.
key just so happens to be shared.
A Twitch
Um,
log, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
And then there's another one named Binny Bun. Um, so it's just interesting to me when we see the exploration of what it means to interact with a game, because like there's plenty of like we think of I don't know, the debates of like walking like games like and like visual novels always being thrown in the air of like, oh, is this a real game or not? Obviously they are, but there's always those like very contested arguments about it. And I would even throw in a like a another argument in there, and is that if you are designing interaction design to like either control characters, either control change the scenario of the stream, I think you're in the games, like you're in the game area. You're iterating, you're playtesting,
Hmm.
you're creating a designed experience in the overall scope.
Hmm.
And another one last person, oh, I guess okay, you know what? I'll leave it there. So these folks, I believe, work a lot with OBS, where their OBS commands will essentially do all the like the logic of going from this reason to another node. And I think this is where it becomes like the full streamer like exploration, right? Like I think this is more so streamers finding their piece of the pie of game design rather than like the intersection of game design and streaming. I think this is just kind of their niche and their tool of preference, right? Like I'm using like Godot or like oh my god, now I'm forgetting the name.
Unity,
Unreal, but there's also the like little ones. I'm trying to think of the Pixel game that's or the Pixel engine. I've used it before.
Asperite?
No,
I don't know. That's not an engine.
No, you're so good. I'm going
If
to
anybody knows what we're talking about, it's in the bottom right. Pico 8, says Margaret.
Very close. Let's see.
One of them.
But it's like there's a lot of like smaller engines that I'm thinking of where I was looking at Bitsy. Apologies.
Bitsy.
But like there are some game engines out there that don't require a bunch of code or like don't require like a certain amount of like beef to your like engine, right? And yes, an RPG Maker is one of those where it's like we just have our preferred tools, but the game design is still being done, right?
Yeah.
And then the final end I'll also leave on for game design and VTubing is this really, really exciting intersection where VTubers are just in-game engines and they're making a whole game to stream off of. And like it like there's
they're streaming the creation of the game kind of thing, like inside of Unreal Unity. Nice.
They're just making their character in their game their streamed character. Like it's very, very cool to see the growth of how like okay, I'm gonna send a couple of names here. Again, I'm just like such a fan of all the like indie streamers, VTubers out here that are really like pushing their niche and really exploring how far they can go. So Byte is one example where they're doing all their overlays and streams in Godot. They do 2D and 3D Godot streams. The one that I link is essentially Byte's like offshoot overlay character game that they made to put in for an application. And like this is essentially where you can see how you literally can code an entire game that's meant to be streamed off of. Another great example of this is Doig and Swift. Doig and Swift are two characters. Oh my god, I don't know if that went through the mic. I'm so sorry. But Doig and Swift are two 3D modeled characters. They are, I believe, partners. And they kind of like stream off of computers like back to back of each other. And they have like their game pads out and they're designing an entire world where they interact with chat. They move their like modeled heads around. They like have objects get spawned in based on like different redeems or call outs. And they also just like specifically come from the animation field. So what they do in their day-to-day is like 2D animation and like TV content. Another name I'll drop is Mordecai on Twitter. Mordecai does an entire game in Unity where it's essentially, and they not only are doing their whole game in Unity and streaming out of it, they have their like lore of the world being documented also on their Discord. They have like a Patreon and a Discord where that like world building is being built out and also being streamed. And it's very fascinating to see a game being built live and like having players like be in that space and being in that world building aspect is very interesting to me. And then one last one.
Tell us.
Again, I love indie streamers. They're out here, they're doing their work, they're doing what they can. I like the indie field is just so exciting. So yes, and then the last one is Flyan, I believe is how you pronounce it, but they have their like chat be like mod or mobs. They're like mobs in their world. And so it's very similar to if you think of like Cult of the Lamb has that plugin with Twitch where you can have your players like enter the world, quote unquote, as just like name tags. But it is very fascinating to see this world where like when the audience are getting to experience being a side character in a game, Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's been ever so exciting to be. I don't want to be the main character in a game. I kind of just want to be the side character and, give you little quests and give you little like inquiries. But
Wow.
yes, that's the huge spectrum of how VTubing and game design has been explored on
I
the
love
streaming
this.
space.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I'm sure you're going to wind up with a couple of people out of this episode who are applying some of these aspects, some of these tactics to their own studios and their own games. I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but with my own studio, the Delve Bros, we actually experimented with a prototype that we were semi near to continuing with that we called Stream Heist, which is where the streamer was somebody cracking into a museum and trying to steal stuff. And then
Ooh.
the audience was their crack tech team. And so there were actual mini games that you could play in chat that would allow you to like hack a webcam or control a robot. And as a result, your audience could either be your crack tech team and help you steal stuff, or more often than not, they would troll you and like, turn a camera to spot you and set off the alarms or whatever. And we thought it was a really cool prototype. We didn't go with it because we were all pretty new to that space, and so we were a little bit hesitant about committing to something that we just didn't know very well. But the prototypes were really fun. It was inspired by Marbles on Stream, if you're familiar with that one.
Yes.
Yeah, which is for those listening is just a game that streamers will often put on like in between games where everybody in the chat is one marble in a marble race, and so you actually win or lose, which is kind of genius. So I love this. I think the most important place to go with this. There's already a lot of inspiration for those who are listening, because a lot of the people in this room are dreaming of starting a studio one day or are actively doing it. I'd love to hear your take on like the most approachable, or maybe not even just the most approachable, the ways that you recommend an indie studio apply some of this stuff to what they're doing.
Well, I would say this. I think an audience is some takeaways I would leave with would be your audience will be so fascinated and so excited to see your world, even outside of the linear game experience or whatever the designed experience is. Even if they get to have someone talking and just roam around a space is like just as engaging as someone hearing like people talk and be on a podcast. There's something visually stimulating about being able to explore that same space, but like in a whole different context of like, oh, I'm just conversing with someone in that world. And that's not that difficult to necessarily replicate. You could even go as simple as having you live play the game while talking, right? Like there's plenty of like of audience and fandom towards like gameplay like YouTubers, right? Like you could essentially be replicating that same quote unquote tech, right? You just stream your gameplay but also talk. And VTubers is very like not rigid. I think that the idea of what a VTuber is, quote unquote, is sometimes outside of the space looking very rigid and very like plain. I think there's a recent example via the was it Castlevania that did a very like poor quality Dante VTuber for their like for their promotion. I think there was a lot of online upsetness about that VTuber and like and I think that as long as you are engaging with the audience in a way that is like inviting, I think like it will be very successful, like regardless of how like high tech it needs to be. I think a lot of indie VTubers start off so simple, and as long as you have that engagement and like you have that level of like welcoming air, I think you'll have a long-term like ease of having that engagement that you want to get. I think also having voices in your I think this also kind of leans in the world of like, does your game have voices, right? Like I think not voice acting is a very like not to say it's expensive, but it's definitely not cheap to get your games voiced. I know it's not like but also there's plenty of streamers out there by the way, where the tech is the audio is still playing. Like if you had that sound effect saved, you could have it where anytime the audio is like, if the mic is catching an audio, it could play that sound effect, and then you can have live captions. So you could still do it like in your game where the dialogue box is kind of like your captions on screen. Like it is really flexible out there to like lean in with what you know. Like that's really not discouraged in this space. Lean in with what your game is, lean in with what your like what your knowledge is, like whether it's coding in your game, there's plenty of streamers coding in their game engines, or if it's just like making PNGs and making a like a LARPing low effort like coded stream. Like you have all of the world to play with. It's just what is going to be suited for your IP and your ease of access of like getting it done, right?
Yeah, really interesting. The at the end of the day, so I'm a game designer and I've worked more traditionally in game design. And one of the things that is always maybe not challenging, but it's just always really important, is understanding your audience, engaging with your audience, and getting feedback from your audience. Some audiences are like eager to do that. Most audiences, I would say, are generally excited to give you their feedback, their opinions. But it's its own challenge to kind of like to have those dialogues and to make time for those dialogues, and then to also like sift through those dialogues, because you'll wind up getting a lot of feedback and some of it will be totally unrelated to the type of game you're making or whatever. This strikes me as actually a really powerful game design tool, since we're talking about the intersection of VTubing and game design. Especially the example you gave of Mordecai, where they're actively writing their world lore with the audience sitting with them. Because then, I've worked, by the way, on so many teams where I'm a solo designer, and so like I'm kind of getting feedback from the other team members, but mostly they're doing their own thing, and so I'm left in something of a silo that can be kind of on the emotional side a little depressing, and then on the sort of professional side just harder to ideate inside of. And so being able to engage the audience and bring the audience in and just like even make them a part of making the game, I think makes a lot of sense, and is something I can imagine an audience would love to do if you can get them to come be there with you while you're doing it.
It's really great to see when the community is actually being like, this is kind of like one of those things where it's like community management, like support is like your community will be as engaged as much as you're like welcoming them to like play in the same space as you, right?
Yeah, and it is. We were talking about this earlier. There's a couple of VTubers that you mentioned who are essentially like the stream is the game.
Yes.
They are creating a game in stream actively, and therefore that game is one of one. It will never be played again quite the same way. That's something I love, kind of pushing the boundaries of what game design and game development actually is. And I think that's a beautiful example of indies creating something brand new. A game is still a game if it doesn't actually, quotes, ship anywhere. The fact that the audience is there and playing that game and the input just so happens to be a chat, that's still a game. And that's also actually a really compelling kind of game, because as I said, the audience will never get that again. This is unique. This is the only time it's ever happening. There's no buying it.
You know what it's reminding me of? Like, this might be a really, really deep pull, but like on old websites, when you had like flash games and like chat rooms that are attached to a flash game and attached to a site, it's like those, like that game was never shipped, but also like the chat room experience and like that being of the time that site is live. And then once that site goes down, it's like, I don't have like a copy of that game to like pull out whenever. It's just like, that was an experience that I had. I think this is also like, I guess a better contemporary example of this is like Blazeball was like, it wasn't something, it was a game of its time. Like whether you played it while it was live or you didn't play it while it was live and you heard about it outside of it. Like there are some games that really like thrive in the live aspect of that space.
Yeah, there's some sort of psychology of exclusivity there, like it is the only way to play this is to come be there live with it, and then it's gone forever. There is a YouTuber that I watch called Doug. He's far more he's far less indie than the rest of these. He's a very big person at this point. But what he loves to do is he plays traditional games. These are not like brand new games or anything, so he'll play GTA or whatever. But he creates a coding sublayer that makes weird stuff happen in the game. So the most tame versions are like Twitch can spawn random stuff while he's playing GTA 5. And then the most hilarious versions, in my opinion, are like Twitch tries to steer a plane all collectively and like they'll just stream for 4 hours while they try to make it from one point to another and mostly crash the plane over and over again and do hilarious stuff. And it's pretty great content, and it is the one moment that your message winds up steering the plane the correct way is pretty, or the incorrect way for that matter, is pretty satisfying. But when you go, I swear I was the one that typed in right and it went right, it's amazing how satisfying that is. All right, I want to get a couple of community questions in here. So let's start with the question from Roberto, which I think is a nice introduction to community questions. So Roberto asks, what software did you use to make your VTuber avatar and setup? What software are you using to make your game?
Okay, so my VTuber is made of I made the art assets in Procreate, and then I export it to VTube Studio. VTube Studio has a kind of like partner program with I think it's called Cubism, and
Okay.
Cubism is kind of like the partnered like rigging software that like goes with VTube Studio. And then so my VTuber is rigged on that, and then the world that my model lives in is just in OBS. So OBS being the capture card or the capture program, but also being the program that has the environmental elements.
The background and the foreground and.
I hope to eventually go into Godot for my, like, that's my current project, is to convert my stream into Godot. I think Shindig's, or sorry, not Shindig's, Taijiro does this really well. Taijiro is had converted his giant OBS setup to then become like Godot scenes with all the different nodes of the 2D world that he was living in.
Amazing. Okay, sweet. So now everybody has a little bit of direction on where to go. All right. Lendary asks, what do you think would be the major benefit of VTubing a character from the game you are creating, potentially while streaming the creation of said game?
I would say that the introduction of a character outside of just the gameplay is very interesting to me. I think that like there's plenty of game dev streamers that actually don't, like, while they're in the creation of the game, like the ones that I showed are obviously VTubers that are like displaying a character in their game, but there's plenty of benefit of also just streaming the game itself being developed. I think the benefit specifically in playing a character in that world is essentially giving an angle into the world that feels a little bit more organic, rather than that like top view god interaction that's like, oh, let me, like, tell me more about that world that you're like handling right now on screen, versus like, oh, you're a character in this world, like what is your character doing in this world, like what is like the invitation of like of angling is very different, of like the conversation and the context that the viewer comes in. Like if you think of a viewer coming in the first 10 seconds, if they're noticing that you're interacting with the world, then their questions are going to be like, why are you here? What's this setup? Like, they're focusing more on the game. While if you're not like your character, then their interest is more like you and like what you do. So there's just like a different angle and approach of focus of a viewer's initial read of a stream.
Yeah, that's interesting. It strikes me too. So one of the like trends in indie games right now is multimedia, where people are releasing their game, but they're also releasing different forms of content alongside the game. So they're releasing a comic book, or they're releasing an actual novel, or they're releasing a movie, or they're releasing just merch, even for that matter, toy line or something like that, or a board game. I've seen people do simultaneous board game, video game releases. And this strikes me as an extension of that same phenomenon. Like, this is you giving your audience a deeper cut in what your game actually is. And then in addition to that, there's an old motivational framework that I like to refer back to sometimes called the Octalysis framework, which is like a theory on why gamification works. And in that framework, ownership is one of the big ones that people tend to care about in games. So something that makes it feel like it's mine. I've done this. This is my world. And this feels like a sort of almost natural continuation of that phenomenon. Not only do I get to like make something cool in this game once I get my hands on it, but I am actively participating in the creation of the game. It's even more mine than it ever could have been before.
Like honestly, sometimes there's a lot of it's very interesting in the way that like if you see long-term stream audience, the amount that they end up supporting sometimes can equal the amount of like a Kickstarter tier. Like sometimes it
Hmm.
is kind of the same if you like put it, depending on the like how long you put into the streaming aspect, like sometimes it kind of equals out to what they would have paid of being like a Kickstarter backer, and then they get like updates and polls and feedback through that. Like it's just
Hmm.
different avenues of engagement of
Hmm.
your long-term audience.
Yeah, and I would assume you would agree. This is not a golden bullet. This is not a technique to use on every game ever. There's different ways to go about making a wonderful game, but this is one to consider at the very least.
Hmm. Hmm.
All right, this is an extremely actionable question. It'll be our last one, then we'll wrap up. This is from Rick. Rick says, "What is the best time of day to get a consumer audience for a game to participate in a character cast?"
That is that's probably as broad as you can get, just
Hmm.
because I will say because I guess it always depends on what you're streaming, right? So I think shoot, I think Pirate Software
Hmm.
made a video about this where he was explaining in like a YouTube short that was like if you are looking at the off times of a category, so if you are VTubing just your game development and then you're looking at the game development category, then that category probably has on and off times, and those like popularity like hours do matter. But I will say that like if the angle is like best times for VTubing, then that's kind of global. Like it's
Hmm.
kind of international at this point in regards to like there are a ton of like VTubers out there. I think where VTubers right now have found the longevity is making sure you release like clips on like not even just like YouTube, TikTok, but like even
Hmm.
just like those sites that you would have that audience. Like the best explanation of this is like all the indie streamers that I've been following via their VTubing, all their development videos really pop off on like Twitter and like Blue Sky. But like any of the videos like Doig and Swift make, where it's like kind of um like more so like content of here's a funny moment and like more so like funny like interaction, then like that gets really popular on like their TikToks and their YouTube. So like just know where your audience is looking for what
Hmm.
content and like post there, I guess. But in
Hmm.
regards to best times, it's like, well, the time that one, first of all, is accessible to you, but two, it's also like
Hmm.
whatever the competition is either less heavy. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I probably would say about the same thing. The one of those like fundamental aspects of game business that a lot of juniors or indies skip is the target audience. Who are you actually targeting? Like the specific people, specific characteristics that you believe this game is exactly for. My answer to that question would be like, well, when do those people watch streams?
Mhm.
Like if you're, and that would be the ideal time. So if your game is for, is if you're targeting specifically the East Coast for whatever reason, or you think that your people are going to be on the East Coast, and your game is for an adult audience, then probably target it, an hour after work on the East Coast.
Mhm.
If your game is more for, let's say, a Chinese audience or something, for whatever reason, you believe it to be more for a Chinese audience, or it's for kids, I think the answer to that question is just who do you think this game is most for? And then find the time that would work best for those people. And I think your point there, find the time that's best for you, is actually probably the most important point, because we're all indies and we're all crunched and we're all probably working another job to make our dreams come true.
Mhm.
And so, don't sacrifice your well being because you think some time is going to be better than another.
Yeah, essentially. Always put yourself first.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So we are at the end of the episode. Before we say goodbye, we like to do two things here.
Mhm.
So the first thing is to assign some homework. What is a homework assignment that the audience can do in the next week that'll take them about an hour to practice some of what we talked about here today?
Oh, okay. I will say it would be great homework to if it's a game you already own, just like
Mhm.
even iterating what an overlay would look like would be really fun. Just
Mm,
imagine what like you don't even have to implement it necessarily, you don't even have to stream on it, but just like
mhm.
convert with what you have. Work with the assets you do have and what is the best way to rearrange it for the sake of streaming. And
Mm.
if that 1 hour of like reshuffling of your assets end up being like, "Oh, this actually looks really cool," or like, "This was a lot of effort and my game doesn't really compute with what I'm thinking of," then like, hey, you gave it a shot. You know what I mean?
Mhm. I like that. That's easy. All right. So you have no excuse. I've been saying this the past couple of episodes because I want people to do their homework. Y'all have no excuse not to do this one. This one's easy, y'all. To spend about an hour, practice a little bit of this to imagine what your game, if you have a game that you're actively working on, would look like as a VTuber setup. So tell me about the background, the foreground, any of the interactable elements, what the actual avatar might look like. And then if you don't have a game you're working on, pick a game that would be fun to stream with a VTuber setup and tell us what that setup would look like. You can post about that on LinkedIn. You can tag us, the Indie Game Academy, as well as Ami C. Dot, is your name on LinkedIn. Or if you're feeling uncomfortable at posting publicly, you can always come here to the Discord and post in here. We'll still be excited about it with you. All right, that's going to do it. Before we say goodbye, Ami, would you like to plug anything here at the end of the episode, or do you have any last words of wisdom to give the audience?
Yeah, honestly, I don't have much to plug. I would say follow all the indie streamers that I have promoted and mentioned, and get excited to just like talk to people, even if you're in at your desk all day working at your game. Like at least talk to people. It's really fun and it's really great to be engaged with everyone who wants to be invested in your work and engaged in
Mhm.
what you're doing. That's my last bit.
I love that. Yeah. Talk to people, share what you're working on. It is a fundamental truth of indies that your biggest challenge will be finding an audience for it. And if you are, shutting yourself in a room and working on your game and never talking about it, you won't find that audience. So talk to
Mhm.
people, hang out, find who loves your game and encourage them and connect with them and work with them to make your game even better. That's like kind of the magic of indie games.
Yeah, like,
All right.
especially because oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
The last thing I'll clarify there is that, like, especially coming I'm from, like, Kentucky. It's like all the in-person events aren't really accessible to me, you know? And, like, as
Hmm.
again, I got introduced to game dev and a lot of streaming aspects during COVID, it's like, this is a way for you to access, like, either your community, your colleagues, or even your, like, fans. Like, this is, like, you gotta just put yourself out there.
100%. All right, awesome. Well, this has been a really eye-opening and interesting episode. We've never talked about VTubing on the show before, so thank you for coming here and giving us an introduction. This has been a wonderful episode of the Indie Game Lunch Hour. As always, we're going to be here every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. It happens live in the Discord, so if you want to come ask your own questions, come join us in the Discord. Otherwise, of course, we ask that you share this along to just one other person who you think may also enjoy hearing about VTubers. Ami, I keep trying to say Amy, I'm sorry.
All
Ami,
good.
thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Hope everyone had a
Absolutely.
fun time hearing about VTubers.
I hope you all enjoyed listening. Thank you to all who asked your own questions live. And to those who listened, of course, thank you for listening. We'll be back here again next week, and I hope to see you all then. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Game over.